Alright, so I'm going to show you how to do an oil change on a 2023 Subaru Forester Sport. So, for changing the oil on a 2023 Subaru Forester, you're going to need the following items. You're going to need your oil, 0W20 5 US quarts. You're going to need a new oil filter for the 2023 Subaru Forester. You're going to use that 7317 code for FRAM. That's for FRAM only oil filters. The TG, they come in all these different models. So the first two letters to this are pretty irrelevant. They just tell you what kind of model it is, but you're going to use a 7317 for FRAM only. If you're going to use a different brand, you're going to have to look up that 4-letter code or 4-digit code in the book that's usually at the store. You're also going to need a socket wrench with a 17mm socket on it. You can also use an 11/16, although it will be a little bit loose. 5/8 just doesn't cut it, but 17mm, make sure you can go either way on this socket. Flathead screwdriver in order to be able to pop off those trees underneath where you're going to be trying to access the engine oil drain plug. So you need those. And then you're going to need a oil pan and a funnel. This funnel is a little bit short for my liking. If you're going to be doing this for one of your first times, I'd recommend getting a longer and wider funnel to assist you when you're pouring the new engine oil into the engine, or and when you're pouring the old oil out into the empty container. Lastly, a few cleaning accessories you're going to need. It's just a rag that's pretty clean. I usually keep this one with the oil changes anyways. And then in order to store the oil pan and the funnel, I use a black trash bag, and it just sits in our garage until we need to use it again, but they're in there together. And if you want to use cardboard underneath the vehicle itself and lay it out and make sure you don't get yourself dirty, or to prevent any spills onto your pavement, that's also helpful. I didn't use one for this video because I do have a really big oil pan now. When I was using the smaller one, I used to spill it a few drops here or there, but it does stain your pavement. This one, I just went with it. 5-gallon drain pan. This cost me like 12 bucks at Walmart. You can get all this stuff at Walmart, by the way. Easiest place to get it. So if this is your first time changing oil in a car, or even if you've done it a few times, the other thing I could recommend for the supplies that you're going to need are maybe some gloves. Not the gloves that you would use for yard work, but more the rubber ones. You can find them anywhere. Just keeps your hands clean, especially when you're pulling out that drain plug, when you're getting that old oil out. So the first thing you want to do is going to pop the hood of your car. It's going to be on your left-hand side, on the driver's side. This little hood pop under here. It's a little lever. Just there it goes. So under here, there's just this little cavity, and actually you can see it. It's a little tabby. Push it, oops, sorry. I'm gonna push it to the passenger side and just gonna release it. There you go. Then here is your catch. It's actually your hood holder, as I like to call it. It's actually gonna go right up on that left-hand side in that hole with the arrow next to it. So the first thing I like to do is just crack open, kind of leave that lid on there for the oil so that you don't get any gunk in it. I've already loosened up the filter, same thing. It's just kind of sitting up there but still on. And then I crack out the dipstick to make sure there's airflow so the oil can drain a little bit better. So you have this big air dam up here. You don't need to take the whole thing off. It has just the engine drain oil area. So what you gotta do is pop out these 4 keepers and then just turn it so that you can access the drain plug. When I'm popping out the trees, I just used to use a flathead. I'm just gonna go underneath this little edge. There's a keeper here, and then the tree. I'm just gonna go right in between, top it a little bit. Just gonna wiggle it out and make sure you keep a hold of these things because you're gonna want to put them back in afterwards, so put them in a safe spot. You just turn this over. So now with this open, you can actually see where that drain plug is right there, this guy. So what we're gonna do now is we're gonna go and grab our wrench. What I do want to point out, and the reason why I'm doing this video, is because I've had a occurrence where I accidentally drained the transmission fluid instead of the oil, which is a big pain in the butt. You're not really supposed to change transmission fluid really for most of the lifetime of the car. So I'm used to doing oil changes on my Jeep, and that everything's exposed, you can see everything. But this has the air dam, so I didn't really realize, and it wasn't on this one where it actually has the label of the engine oil drain on it. So when I was looking underneath, I was like, oh, it's got to be back here to that thing. That's the transmission. And this is the transmission drain plug right there. Do not drain this. Do not drain this. If you drain it, don't drive the car anywhere. Have it, either you can figure out how to pump transmission fluid back in, or have it towed to a dealership where they can do this for you. If you make that mistake, do not drive. So I made that mistake. We figured it out pretty soon after when we started filling up the oil, and it wasn't taking as much as it should have been. And when we did the dipstick was also dirty. So the oil had not been changed, and it was actually the transmission fluid. So the biggest thing to remember at this point is that you're about to open the bottom of the oil basin. So you don't want to open it fully without having something underneath, like a bucket. I have a catch right here. It's off screen, but you can really use whatever size you want because this is only 4.4 quarts. So I'll use the smallest pan. It will hold all of that oil, but I just got a bigger one just to make it a little bit easier on space, so I don't have to worry about it. So what you're gonna do first, make sure you have your socket on your wrench. Make sure it's to the right setting. So on mine it says on or off. I'm gonna be taking this thing off. What you're gonna wanna do is just crack it. Make sure that's on there. Righty tighty, lefty loosey. So I actually had to get my fiance to unscrew the oil filter cap for me. He used an impact, just put that 17mm on it, and this is the oil plug. Make sure you just wipe it off before you actually put it back on. Do not use a drill and impact of any sort to put this thing back on. You're gonna wanna hand tighten it so that you don't end up in the situation that I just was in, that it was over tightened. Don't need to over tighten it. It needs to be just tight when you put it back on. The other important thing to note on these oil caps is that they do have a little washer on it. Be sure if you're gonna put it someplace, put it someplace that's actually clean. So I'm not gonna set it on the ground. I put it on the corner of this bag because I wiped it clean beforehand. Don't lose the washer, otherwise you're not gonna get a good enough seal when you put the oil plug back in. So it looks like this guy's done draining. What we're gonna do is we're gonna leave that pan under there. I'm gonna screw that oil plug back in. I do that before doing anything else. Do not try and change the filter right now. Don't try and mess with anything up top until you put that oil plug back in. Otherwise, you're just gonna be putting oil in and it's gonna be draining right out. Okay, so I just slid this basin out of the way a little bit while I went in and just screwed that oil plug in by hand. So it's in my hand, it stopped dripping. Now I'm just gonna put that socket back on socket wrench handle. Make sure it's to on instead of off. Flip it over to on. And then all I'm gonna do is just make sure that I get just a little bit of a crank. That's it. That's all I did right there. There's nothing else I need to do with that. That is gonna be just fine. It's all set. Now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna just put this all back together so that I don't, you know, keep these trees off for too long, because I really do want to make sure that this just goes back on correctly. So I got these trees, right, the ones that we took off, the 4 of them. I'm just gonna pop them right back in. There you go. Easy. Pop, and then boop. Super simple. Little tapered, so once you get it past that first part, it's all in there. Boop. It's done. Remember, we didn't do anything with this screw, so don't go and tighten it. You don't need to. So now that I did that, I'm just gonna reach under and grab this thing if I can. Just pull it out slowly. So make sure when you're pulling that out, put it in a place where you're not gonna trip and step on it and have oil go everywhere. I'll show you after how we drain it into a canister for disposal. So since all the oil's out now, we still have our dipstick out, we still have our engine oil loosened, and we still have the old filter on. We're going to take off this filter and replace it with this guy. Just go in here, just make sure that's totally unscrewed. I'm gonna tip it up, because there's oil still residing in there. So you want to make sure that you're keeping it upright, you're putting it someplace where it's not going to tip over. I just like to stick it right there in the front. It's kind of a cute little compartment. I would not go and wipe this down, because the oil that rotates through here does go back into the engine. So you're really trying to minimize how much stuff it's getting into your oil. Obviously you want 0. So what I'm going to do, grab a little bit of this guy. I'm just going to lubricate that O-ring a little bit. You can use clean oil for this. Doesn't really matter, because there's still going to be engine oil, old engine oil that's in the engine that hasn't run through yet. So it's not that this oil is necessarily super bad for the car. It's just you want to drain it and clean it out so you get old oil out, new oil in, keep your engine running smoothly. So all I'm going to do, just going to put it on those threads, spin it lightly. You do not want to cross thread this thing. So when you're not cross threading, it spins. See how easily that spins? Look at that. So that's what you're looking for. You just want to spin easily. So now I got to just very lightly, I can kind of move it. You're not going to want to crank down on this. Do not crank, because if you do, when you're trying to remove it, you're going to need another special tool to remove it. So just kind of using a little bit of pressure, and there. Boom. So there's 2 ways you can figure out what kind of oil you have for your car. Either, you know, obviously look it up online, make sure you have the correct year, or just on the oil cap itself, 0W20 is what the Subaru 2023 Forester takes. I typically get Mama 1, but you can get any brand, and really whichever kind of label they put on it, it's almost all the same thing, but obviously check with that manufacturer to see what it really does for your car. For the Subaru 2023 Forester, I typically use a Fram oil filter, which I get at Walmart. You can go every other on changing an oil filter, but I just change it every single time, you know, $7 to $8 each time. Whenever I get a new oil filter, I make sure that I check and see, I open the box in the store and make sure that it has the gasket on it. For different types of cars, like my Jeep, the gasket is separate, and you actually have to put that on after or before you actually install the oil filter itself. For these ones, they come with it and it's already in there, so there's no other packaging inside of this. It is just the oil filter itself. And then I check and make sure that that O-ring is there. And before I actually install this, I put a little bit of that old oil on it just to lubricate it a little bit and get a better seal when I screw it into the oil filter cavity. To dispose of the oil filter, I just take it out of its little resting spot, put it in the box face up, boom. Just make sure you don't try and go and reuse this thing, because it's done. So now we're going to want to fill this thing up. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to remove this engine oil lid. Again, put it in a nice safe spot, put it up there. We're gonna crack this thing open. So when you're opening these things, I usually use a key or my thumb, but the important thing to note is that you need to take all the foil off. I do this because if you get any little piece of foil into your engine oil, kaput. It goes right through your engine and keeps getting cycled through. So you're really trying to remove as much of this foil seal as you can so you don't have any possibility of crap going into your engine. So it should look something like that. Obviously I've got still a few pieces, but they have checked and they are really on there, so they're not going to go into the engine. Next I'm going to put my funnel into the oil refill area. I don't know what else I want to call it. So now I'm going to put my funnel into the hole where we're going to be filling the oil. I usually put it this way so that when I pour from this side of the car, I'm pouring this way into the funnel. We reuse our funnel every time. I make sure you use a clean cloth and wipe out any gunk that there might be inside, including the tip of the funnel. Make sure there's reduce any possibility of stuff getting in there. Now all we're gonna do is we're gonna take our oil that we just cleaned off that little rim and throw that into here. Be sure that you're filling it up at a smooth rate because it does, like funnels do, clog up when it's trying to get down into the tank. So this guy takes 4.4 quarts. This is 5 quarts. So you're gonna be using most of the container, but not all of it. So be careful about that. Before you pour your oil in, make sure that your dipstick is at least just kind of sitting out and not plugged in there so that there is air able to come out of the oil pan when you're filling it up so that you don't end up with bubbles and that you get an accurate amount. So I just poured in about, I want to say around 4.5, probably a little less than that, into the actual tank. And I want to now go and check the dipstick to make sure I've got enough in there. So before you actually take any sort of reading on the dipstick, you're going to pull it out, wipe it clean. Should look like this. Right, you see those 2 dots? Bottom dot is minimum, top dot is full. You really want to be in between those 2 dots. You should not be going all the way up to where this twist is in the metal. That means you've overfilled. The sun is out today and we're able to see that we are right up against that top dot. Now as you run your car and as it cycles through, it might go down a little bit. I like to keep it right there. So you can wipe it off again if you want to and try it again just to make sure that you got an accurate reading, but as you can tell, it is really in between. It's just underneath that top dot, which is what we like to see. So I've now taken out the funnel, put it into my other bin that I have, just so that it can sit there and not drain everywhere. And I put the lid back on. I usually like to keep it where I can read it. It's just tight enough where I can unscrew it if I need to, but it's not super snug that I can't get it open. We've already tightened on our filter and we plugged our dipstick in so that it is sitting right there. So everything is connected back up. We put the oil plug back in and physically now the car can just run. You don't need to do anything else. That is how you get the oil out of your car. But now we're going to go into how to dispose of the oil. So as you can see, there's still some clean oil in there. It's kind of actually hard to see. Well, there is oil in there. Trust me on that, because I didn't use the whole thing. But from the last time we did it, I had oil left over as well. So this is clean and this is clean. So what we're going to do in order to dispose of that old oil, we're going to combine these two and then we're going to dump that old oil into this bin. So I've gotten cocky too many times where I thought, yeah, I can just dump that big thing in there, no funnel, use the funnel. Usually I do this on top of a piece of cardboard or on top of a big black trash bag, but had this old styrofoam container, and we're not using it, so I figured that would be a good splash pad, if you will, in case any of the oil does run out. I try and keep it off the driveway, just so it doesn't stain it, but you can really do it wherever you'd like to do it. So I've got my old empty oil container, my funnel, got my old oil that I gotta put into here. Okay, so now all that oil has been drained into that old oil container. I'm just gonna take off the funnel and knock it off a little bit. Throw it into my oil pan, however way you want to set it in there, and just screw it on. Boom. Now, I highly recommend bringing this old oil to an auto parts place where they can recycle it for you. AutoZone, O'Reilly Auto Parts, really any place where you can get your windshield wipers or batteries. Just bring this in there and they'll recycle it for you. As for your old oil filter, which is in here right now, you can just throw it in the trash can. Alright, so since I don't want to buy a new oil catch or a funnel every time, just take a paper towel, wipe it out, and then I grab a black trash bag, put everything in there, wrap it up, and just set it on top of one of my shelves. There, it's all in there. Easy. Alright, so I'm going to just show you the last thing you need to do for your Subaru is to change the oil maintenance setting or to reset it in your car. So what you're going to do is you're going to press this info button up here to get a hold of this screen to change it. So there's obviously a few screens. I'm just pressing through on that same info button, and I keep going until I get to this screen here, push and hold info button for selection screen. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use that same button that I was using to scroll through the screens. I'm going to hold it down, and then it's going to go to this menu up here. So on this menu, it has date, display, beep, climate control, maintenance, and then if you keep going down, it's going to give you more options. But what we're going to do is we're going to use these buttons down here. We're going to press up on them in order to select. We're going to press up on that down button to get down to maintenance, and then in order to select it, you're just going to press up on this guy. So there we go. Now we have engine oil, oil filter, tires, maintenance schedule. I'm just going to go into that engine oil again, up on that little set button, and you're going to select a notification date or whatnot. So if you're not going to use the car, I recommend using a book, something like this, where you can actually log in. Sorry, the lighting in here is not that great right now. Where you can actually log in the mileage and what you did to the car. So if you did some sort of maintenance item like replace windshield wipers, or got the windshield replaced, or got tires replaced or rotated, obviously engine oil change or engine oil filter changed, I would just do that and log it in here so that you do have a record of everything that you had done to the car while it was in your ownership.